They called it Dachin, a kingdom beyond the Western Sea, described as a land of white walls, ordered cities, and disciplined people, vast in scale and structured in a way that felt strangely familiar to those who had only heard of it through distant trade. To them, it didn't feel like a foreign civilization. It felt like a reflection, something that mirrored their own world in ways they couldn't fully explain. And yet, they had never seen it. So what were they really describing? They were describing the Roman Empire, but not the Rome most people imagine. Not just emperors, battles, or conquest. Because Rome's true power wasn't only in what it conquered, it was in how it organized what it controlled. It built systems, structures that allowed millions of people across vast distances to function within a shared framework of law, identity, and expectation. This is what made Rome different. It didn't just expand, it scaled. And in doing so, it created something far more enduring than territory alone, something that could outlast leaders, survive crises, and continue evolving long after its original form had begun to fracture. Because Rome wasn't simply built, it was engineered. Rome began on the Italian Peninsula, a region positioned at the center of the Mediterranean world. Unlike isolated civilizations, Rome existed in constant contact with others, traders, migrants, rival states, and neighboring cultures. To the north, the Alps formed a natural boundary, slowing invasions but never fully preventing them. To the south, east, and west, the sea opened pathways for trade and expansion, connecting Rome to North Africa, Greece, and beyond. This geography created pressure, but also opportunity. Ideas flowed as freely as goods. Religion, philosophy, technology, and governance models all moved through the region, shaping Rome over time. Where some societies resisted outside influence, Rome adapted to it. It absorbed what was useful, discarded what wasn't, and refined what remained into something practical and repeatable. This constant exposure didn't weaken Rome. It trained it. And over time, that ability to adapt would become one of the defining features of its power. Rome's greatest strength wasn't just its army or its architecture. It was its ability to take ideas, no matter where they came from, and turn them into systems. From ancient Greece, Rome absorbed intellectual frameworks, philosophy, literature, and education. Greek thought shaped how Roman elites understood governance, ethics, and society itself. From the Etruscans, Rome adopted practical tools, urban planning, engineering techniques, and religious structures that influenced its early political identity. But Rome didn't simply copy these influences. It organized them. It transformed scattered knowledge into standardized systems, legal codes, administrative structures, and military organization that could be applied across regions with consistency. This is what made Rome scalable. A newly conquered territory didn't need to become culturally Roman overnight. It only needed to function within Roman systems. Local traditions could continue, local leaders could remain. But taxation, law, and military obligations gradually aligned with Rome. This reduced resistance and created stability. Instead of ruling through constant force, Rome often ruled through integration. Former enemies could become allies, allies could become citizens. Over time, this created a network of interconnected regions that didn't just belong to Rome, they operated through it. Rome didn't just dominate territory, it built a structure that made that territory function. To live in Rome was to exist inside a system so deeply embedded in daily life that it became almost invisible. From birth, your position in society shaped your path, not just your wealth, but your family, your connections, and your place within a larger social hierarchy. At the top were elite families whose influence extended across politics, religion, and military leadership. Their names carried weight, and their networks ensured that power remained concentrated within established circles. Below them were ordinary citizens, free individuals with legal rights who could vote, serve in the military, and participate in public life. Their experiences varied widely, from landowners to laborers navigating crowded urban environments. And beneath them were millions of enslaved people, forming the foundation of the Roman economy. Slavery was not hidden, it was a visible, integral part of daily life. Enslaved individuals worked in households, fields, mines, and construction, supporting nearly every aspect of Roman society. Conditions varied, but the system itself was built on control and labor extraction. And yet, Rome did not rely on force alone. It relied on relationships. The patron-client system connected individuals across social levels. Patrons offered protection, resources, and opportunities. In return, clients offered loyalty, political support, and public presence. These relationships shaped elections, legal decisions, and economic activity. They reinforced hierarchy, but also created stability. For many Romans, this system wasn't questioned. It was simply understood. Because in Rome, society wasn't just structured, it was interconnected. On paper, Rome was a republic, a system built on the idea that power should not rest in the hands of a single ruler, but instead be distributed across institutions designed to balance and restrain one another. Two consuls held executive authority, each serving limited terms and each capable of vetoing the other's decisions. The Senate, composed primarily of elite families, guided policy, controlled finances, and shaped long-term strategy. Assemblies allowed citizens to vote, giving the impression that power ultimately rested with the people. It was a system designed to prevent tyranny. But in practice, it functioned very differently. Because power in Rome did not flow through institutions alone. It flowed through relationships. Political success depended on networks, family ties, alliances, reputation, and the ability to mobilize support through the patron-client system. Elections were influenced not just by policy, but by loyalty. Decisions were shaped not just by law, but by influence. The system wasn't broken. It was operating exactly as intended. It allowed competition, but within limits. It encouraged ambition, but required that ambition move through established channels. This created stability, but also tension. Because as Rome expanded, the stakes grew higher. Wealth increased, military power expanded, influence became more valuable. And the system that once balanced power began to struggle under the weight of those changes. Individuals who accumulated enough influence could begin to push beyond the limits of the system itself. And once that happened, the balance Rome depended on began to weaken. One of the most significant turning points in Roman history came through the reforms of Gaius Marius, changes that at first appeared to strengthen the Republic, but ultimately reshaped it in ways that could not be reversed. Before Marius, Rome's armies were composed primarily of citizens who owned land and could afford their own equipment. Military service was both a duty and a privilege, tied closely to identity and participation in the state. Soldiers fought for Rome because they were part of it. But as Rome expanded, this system became increasingly difficult to maintain. Campaigns lasted longer, wars were fought farther from home. The demand for soldiers grew beyond what the traditional system could supply. Marius responded by opening recruitment to the poor, men who previously had no place in the army. This transformed the Roman military. For the first time, large numbers of citizens could serve as professional soldiers, equipped and paid by the state. The army became more standardized, more disciplined, and more effective. At first, the results were overwhelmingly positive. Rome's military strength increased, campaigns became more efficient, victories became more consistent. But beneath these improvements, a deeper shift was taking place. Because these soldiers were no longer tied to land or local identity. They were tied to their commanders. Generals now controlled not just armies but livelihoods. They determined pay, distributed rewards, and promised land after service. Loyalty began to change. It was no longer directed toward the Republic as an abstract system. It became personal. And once loyalty became personal, power followed. Generals who commanded successful armies gained immense influence, not just on the battlefield, but within Rome itself. They could leverage their military success into political power. They could challenge rivals. They could reshape the system. This didn't immediately destroy the Republic, but it altered its foundation in a way that could not be undone. Because from this point forward, Rome's political future would be shaped not just by laws and institutions, but by the ambitions of the men who commanded its armies. At its height, the Roman Empire stretched across 3 continents, connecting regions that had once been divided by language, culture, and geography into a single functioning system. From the windswept frontiers of Britain to the deserts of North Africa, from the forests of Gaul to the eastern cities shaped by Greek and Persian influence, Rome created something unprecedented for its time. a network of territories that operated under shared rules, shared expectations, and to a certain extent, a shared identity. This wasn't just expansion, it was consolidation. Roman roads cut through landscapes with precision, engineered not just for movement but for control. Armies could be deployed quickly, trade could flow more efficiently, information could travel faster than ever before. Every road led back to Rome, but more importantly, every road reinforced Rome. Cities across the empire began to mirror the capital itself. Forums, baths, amphitheaters, and administrative buildings appeared in distant provinces, creating familiar structures in unfamiliar lands. To live in one part of the empire was, in many ways, to experience echoes of another. This consistency created stability, but it also created dependence. Water flowed through aqueducts that stretched for miles, supplying growing urban populations. Grain shipments moved across the Mediterranean, feeding cities that could no longer sustain themselves independently. Trade networks expanded, connecting producers and consumers across vast distances. The system worked, and because it worked, it grew. But growth came with a cost. As the empire expanded, so did its complexity. Additional territories meant more administration. Extra people meant more resources required to maintain order, and more borders meant more pressure from outside forces testing the limits of Roman control. At the same time, wealth became increasingly concentrated. Elites grew more powerful, while ordinary citizens faced rising economic pressure. Urban populations expanded, but opportunities did not always keep pace. The system that had once created balance began to strain under its own success. And yet, from the outside, Rome still looked invincible. Its armies were disciplined, its infrastructure was unmatched, its cities were symbols of power and permanence. It had survived wars, rebellions, and internal conflict. It had adapted again and again, which made it easy to believe that it always would. But systems like this don't collapse when they appear weak. They collapse when they appear strongest, when the weight of their own scale, complexity, and internal pressure becomes too great to sustain. And by the time those pressures become visible, the system is already beginning to fail. The decline of Rome was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual process shaped by internal instability, economic pressure, and external threats that tested the limits of the system. As the empire expanded, maintaining control became increasingly difficult. Borders stretched across vast distances, requiring constant military presence to defend against invasions and uprisings. At the same time, political stability began to erode. Emperors rose and fell rapidly, often through violence or betrayal. Leadership became unpredictable, and the continuity that had once supported the system began to break down. The crisis of the 3rd century exposed just how fragile the empire had become. During this period, Rome faced multiple simultaneous crises: economic disruption, military threats, and internal conflict. Regions broke away, authority fractured. The system that had once integrated the empire began to pull apart. Reforms were introduced in an attempt to stabilize the situation. Power became more centralized. Administration became more rigid. The empire adapted, but at a cost. Flexibility was reduced. Resilience weakened. The system became more dependent on strong leadership at the top, something that could not always be guaranteed. And over time, these pressures accumulated. Not enough to destroy Rome instantly, but enough to ensure that it could no longer function as it once had. In 476 CE, the Western Roman Empire came to an end. But Rome itself did not disappear, because what Rome built was never limited to territory alone. Its systems, law, governance, infrastructure, and cultural influence continued to shape the societies that followed. Roman legal principles influenced the development of modern legal systems. Concepts of citizenship, governance, and administration continued to evolve, built on foundations that Rome had helped establish. Its language, Latin, gave rise to entire families of modern languages. Its architecture influenced how cities were designed. Its ideas about power and organization continued to echo through history. Even after the fall of the Western Empire, the Eastern Roman Empire, what we now call the Byzantine Empire, continued for nearly 1,000 years, preserving and adapting many of these systems. Rome did not vanish. It transformed. And maybe that's why, across vast distances and without direct contact, another civilization once described it as something familiar. Not as an unknown force, but as something recognizable. A reflection of how humans organize power, structure society, and build systems that extend beyond individual lifetimes. Because Rome was never just an empire, it was a blueprinter. And in many ways, we are still living inside its design. Sounds fake? It's history. Subscribe for more real history that sounds fake.